Okay, kind of independent of Asset Calc Go or Asset Calc for that matter, iPlan doesn't matter. This rollout has given us a good excuse to kind of review the prime directives of a project manager in terms of completing an FCA. So there's a lot more detail and many more modules in our curriculum about this, but I'm going to do a quick video here to really drive home these core points. So it doesn't matter what kind of FCA you're doing. One of your prime tasks is to identify the short-term issues and deficiencies. What's wrong, what's broken, what's missing. What are the things the property owner needs to take care of in the first few years to fix their deficiencies in their building? Another main task you need to do is adjust RULs. Even if you know the year of something and you put that in the field, it is your duty to bump those RULs. Not doing that, I mean, we could send out drones and robots. The reason we have humans is to make this professional judgment and bump those RULs. More on that in a bit. Assign meaningful plan types. Think about the plan type. Why is replacement necessary of that item? Is there something wrong with it today? Or is it just a life cycle thing? Everything's fine today, but you're going to need to plan for spending for replacement of it in the future. And then the thing that ties this all together is making sure all those data points correlate. Do they make sense? Do they tell a consistent story? Does your RUL and your plan type tell a consistent story about what's going on with that asset? Big misses and gross outliers. These are the things we get caught from the client more than anything else, in addition to inconsistent data correlation. Just the other day, we reviewed a report. There was a $37 million backflow preventer in it. Or you didn't assess the roof. Those are the kinds of things you don't want to miss. And finally, summarize your findings. The new master has been changed such that we expect a few good narrative sentences to be written about the architectural and the mechanical systems at the property. A lot of times that's the only thing an executive's ever reading. So I think development-wise, we've saved you guys a decent amount of time with these improved tools. What we're asking for back in return is some focus on just a few good sentences of narrative. Provide value where we want to provide value. And even more so than the words, this part is even easier. Make your photo log tell a story. As the cliche goes, the picture's worth 1,000 words. A lot of times we end up focusing on assets and asset photos, and we shortchange the photo log, which is the visual synopsis of the building. Don't let that happen. Going into just a little bit more detail about data correlation here. So we published quite a few charts on this. This is probably the 6th. I think all of them are good. This is yet another way we're trying to get across the same information. 3 basic buckets. If you stay within these buckets for any asset that you describe, you are going to be at least a B student. You are going to be 80% and 90% there. There's always times to debate and philosophize about the nuances of the data correlation and what RUL should exactly go with this. But if you just stay with this, you're going to be mostly there. And even more than the third, just the top 2. Anything that's deficient or broken or failed should have one of those plan types. The reason accessibility is crossed off is because we're moving away from accessibility in our standard scope. But there are still going to be a lot of jobs where accessibility is still there. That's still considered a deficient plan type. A condition like this should correspond with a plan type of this and an RUL somewhere in the first couple years. And when you have items like that, you have comments required, both in Asset Calc in the comment box and in the text master under the actions and comments description. When you have life cycle renewals, these things that are fine today, it should be one of the three fair or better conditions. It's a life cycle renewal asset. And the vast majority of the time, we don't want to see that RUL in the first 2 years. It should be 3 years or beyond. And for those type of items, you don't need to add comments unless you think you're adding a lot of value. So red and green, kind of the binary yes, no. There is kind of this orange area in between, completing the traffic light, kind of these in-betweeners. Environmental and modernization adaptation plan types kind of bridge the gap between deficient and life cycle. So it kind of splits the difference. A lot of times your RUL will be somewhere between 3 and 7. Maybe you want that thing to be in the 5-year plan. A lot of clients focus on a 5-year plan. If you do that, make the RUL 3, 4, or 5. Usually those things, the condition is not bad enough to warrant an RUL less than 3. If the condition is bad enough, then you should highly consider changing the data to more like this set in red. And we do encourage comments for these in-between kind of plan type scenarios. There's usually some value-added commentary associated with environmental or modernization adaptation type items. Going to the last topic about adjusting RUL. I don't know how many reviewers still tell me that we don't do this properly. So we're going to belabor this point yet one more time with some pictures here. There's probably 3 very common scenarios with RUL. First scenario is the component is somewhere within the first 2/3 of its EUL and it's still working fine. So a lot of times you'd have a plan type of life cycle renewal, you'd have a condition of good or fair, and it's not an immediate need. And you do this arithmetic, it's an item that's supposed to live 30 years and it's actually 14 years old. And the arithmetic that's defaulted to you says there's 16 years left. In a scenario like this, it's fine. The math is fine. There's no reason to make any changes here. Scenario number 2, an item has failed prematurely or it's really, really getting close to failing prematurely. You'd have a condition of poor or worse. In this one, we're saying it's an immediate need. We're putting a plan type of performance. Your data needs to correlate such that your RUL, especially if this is something failed or very close to it, we like to say failed stuff is RUL 0 and close to failure is RUL 1. So things that are failing or aging faster than they should, you need to bump the RUL down. The real age is what here? 14 years. We overrode the 14 and made it 29 such that the RUL is 1. I think most of our assessors get this. Most of our assessors get scenario 1 and scenario 2 without much problem. It's scenario 3 that causes the pain. So, and this happens quite a bit. There are a lot of components that age well past their EUL. Things last longer than expected. In this case, you don't want to say the thing is poor or failed if it isn't. So a lot of times we end up saying this component is fair. It's not an immediate need because it's not broken today, and we still call it a life cycle kind of thing. But what a lot of our assessors fail to do is to bump this effective age and remaining useful life. You can't just let the arithmetic play out. The effective age on this thing installed in 1982, think of this as a electrical switchboard is a great example. A lot of times they last well beyond 30 years. So this thing's actually 36 years, and if you let the arithmetic pass through, it's going to say you have an RUL of 0, which does not jive with the data up here. So it is your duty to bump this up at least to 2, if not 3, 4, or 5. So put in whatever effective age you need to do to make that happen. We don't want to see RULs of 0 for things that have not failed. All right, that'll do it for the... oh, no, my bad. One last thing. So one thing I love to do as a PM, let me shrink this just a bit, it's not fitting on one page, is at the end of any day, go old school. I don't care if you love iPads and technology or not. I, for one, do. But still, take out a piece of paper at the end of your day and write this stuff down. It's just quick notes about your building, especially if you're doing a bunch of buildings that week and you want to remember what's really important for that building on Monday as you work through your week. Write it down before you forget. Just the big, most important salient points, kind of hearkening back to what I said up here, the things you don't want to screw up or neglect. So this doesn't have to be painful. You can do this in about 3 minutes usually. I'm writing down to myself. This building was built in '86. They added an east wing in 2004, and when they did that, they completely redid the HVAC and plumbing for the whole building. Everything else is mostly original. A few exceptions to that in the HVAC realm are I saw one boiler and one rooftop unit that was failed, and everything else is okay, life cycle only. Making a note to myself that the roof is still original and it's leaking, so we probably want that in the short term. Also, there's some settlement issues at the northwest corner. Let's throw in a study for that. The finishes are dated but functional, and when I enter my data, I'm going to make sure that all of this is accounted for. And lastly, ADA. Okay, there were some minor problems with parking, signage and striping issues. I took some photos. The elevator is a major problem. The cab's not big enough. So in 2 minutes, I'm able to jot down some notes that when I write this report and enter my data, I'm going to be sure I don't miss any of these really important things, and I'm going to be in good shape. All right.